All right, we're going to call our meeting to order. It is January 15th, 2020. This is our regular meeting. We're here in the Murfreesboro Police Headquarters Community Room. We have several items on the agenda. Assistant City Manager Darren Gore is going to be pinch hitting for Mr. Tyndall, who is out of town. And our first workshop item is going to be going over our budget and financial update, starting with a mid-year budget review. Mr. Gore.
Okay. Ms. Stucker.
Well, you are.
This is her show, so
And now your first lesson in delegation.
Well, I don't. When we run the Water and Resource Board meeting, whoever put the memo together gets to explain the summary, background, and so forth. So I know you've. Aaron, all Aaron insisted was she go before me, so
no, that's right.
you're
That's
good to go.
Yeah,
Ms. Tucker, the floor is yours.
Well, we're just going to take a look at the budget highlights through December. So just a quick overview of the budget process. During the budget process, Council determines the priorities for the upcoming fiscal year, and then based on that feedback, we develop a framework for the budget. And departments submit their budget recommendations to the City Manager and Finance for review. And then we hold budget review sessions to fine-tune and get a better understanding of what's been submitted. Then we submit that budget to y'all by May 15th. And then Council then holds public workshops to review budgets in detail and gather more information. And then, as you know, the budget must be adopted by June 30th. So as far as budget principles, the city has a conservative budget approach. We look at historical trends for major revenues, any new legislation which may impact things like state share taxes, other economic factors to help gauge where we think revenues will fall in the upcoming fiscal year. And expenditures are applied by reviewing recurring costs, historical trends, and any planned projects that we know about. And then we also look to see what costs can be eliminated or trimmed down during this process. We base the approach around City Council's priorities, and in December, Council approved new priorities, and those are responsible budgeting, improve economic development, expand infrastructure, establish a strong city brand, and maintain public safety. So we'll work to incorporate those new goals into next year's budget as well. So before we get into FY20's information, I'd like to give an update on FY19. FY19 audit has not been released. We anticipate it being released either later this month or early next month. So while we don't anticipate any changes, I am presenting this as unaudited in case anything else should arise. So for FY19, we do anticipate an increase to fund balance around $3 million. This is due in part to increased revenues that were over budget and also budgeted savings and deferral of budgeted expenses. So the chart here shows some of the major budget to actual differences realized in revenues. And you can see here we had about $1.6 million more in land sales than was budgeted. We also had about $500,000 more for Rover grant revenues that were actually related to FY18 but had been deferred because of the timing of when we received it. We also recognized a bit more revenues in recreation and in interest income for the year. However, those increases are offset by things that were less than budget, including sales tax revenues, which was down almost $900,000, and then infrastructure and solid waste revenues were down as compared to budget.
Why sales tax was down? Do we have an explanation for that?
Well, I can't say for sure, honestly, on that. We had a lot of growth over the previous years. I think it was something like 6% in prior years. I think, honestly, we might have been a bit too aggressive in our budget number last year. And so we did factor that into the FY20 budget when we did that. And we're running a little over budget, which is better than under. But we recognize more of a 4% increase in FY19's increase over FY18, whereas I think we budgeted closer to 6%.
So it wasn't that sales tax was down.
We're not down, no,
Down in 19, it was just.
not as
a-
high.
One high as projected.
Right, it wasn't as high as we had hoped. So on expenditures, salaries and benefits showed a savings of about 1.6 million, which is around 2%, and that's primarily due to vacancies. And then we also deferred expenses of around 4.5 million, and that's for things like roads, fixed assets, insurance. We had some timing changes on our insurance premiums. But these costs are expected to be realized in FY20. So, you know, that's why we call them deferred expenses rather than budgeted savings. And this is a good time to point out that, you know, the budget is based on a cash basis, whereas the audit is based on an accrual basis of accounting. And those differences really relate to things like receivables and other items that aren't cash basis, that we can't actually spend. And so we can't budget based on that accrual basis. We budget based on actual cash that we'll have. So we'll now take a look at FY20 highlights unless there are any other questions about FY19.
Just one question. How would the sale of MED, if it does continue, how would that affect the employees' expenses? Or is that department even included in that number?
This is not, this is all just general fund.
Okay.
So that's, yeah, it wouldn't factor into this at all.
Not at all. Okay.
Okay. So I'm happy to report that we appear to be meeting our budget expectations, if not exceeding, in some areas so far this year. So here's a look at our budgeted revenues. Property tax accounts for 32% of budget, and local sales tax makes up an additional 26%. State sales tax makes up 6%, hotel motel 2%. All other taxes account for 10%, and then intergovernmental revenues make up around 11%. So as you know, FY20 showed our first property tax increase in around 21 years. Prior to that, we showed a 2.5% growth in property tax in FY19, which was considerably less than the 5.3 increase in FY18 and 4.6 in FY17. The local option sales tax went from the 6% growth in FY17 and 18 that we just talked about down to 4% in FY19. Again, we were a bit more aggressive in our FY19 budget revenues, so this year we budgeted more conservatively, and so far we're running about 2% over budget and about 3% over last year. So the hotel motel tax rate was increased from 2.5% to 5% this year. Hotel revenues reported are consistent with prior years, and I believe the finance department intends to look into doing a hotel motel audit later this year. And that will help ensure accurate and consistent reporting by the hotels.
Is this end of October or?
No, well, okay, so yeah, again, this is where we're on that cash basis. So this is through October's collections that we've received through December. So the state is 2 months behind in remitting those to us from the actual time that they were collected. So this is on the cash basis. But when you compare to where we were this time last year, that's where I said we're 2% over. And then we true it up.
On the hotel motel?
It's the same.
Same deal?
Yeah, they're a month. They're a month behind. Yeah.
Okay.
So on other local taxes, these include business license, beer and liquor, franchise, and in lieu of property taxes. And these taxes have stayed flat over the past few years, and collections are very comparable to last year, I think within about 5,000, or about 5,000 over where we were the same time last year. So again, it looks like, you know, we're way low, but we have year-end accruals that factor into this, and that that accrual basis of accounting will change. We don't expect any significant drops in that. On state sales tax, with the increased population resulting from the special census, we talked about that at my last presentation. The state share of sales tax increased substantially from FY18 to FY19, and we're still seeing those results here. And so far, we're running about 4% over budget on the state share. So here I'm showing comparison information for the other revenues from FY16 to FY20. And these generally show consistent trends for license and permits, charges for services, and fines and penalties. Intergovernmental revenues have a higher increase, and that's due primarily to higher grant revenues that we see, but those also have a corresponding increased grant expenditure.
Hey, Aaron, I'm sorry to
No, you're fine.
interrupt you, but on that last slide, I just want to make sure I read that right. I thought I read something in our package that it was. Is this the one? Is it state sales that we were? It was like a 7% overall,
Right.
But it was. We felt like 3% of that was because of census, and the
Right.
other 4 is just kind of same.
That's exactly
same
right.
state, you know,
Yeah.
apples to apples.
7%
from last
over
year.
this time last year versus 4% over budget. So we did, budget for growth, just,
Oh, 4% over budget. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So do we have a kind of an idea of how much of that number, and if maybe I'm thinking about this wrong, but how much of that 7% number total is because of the increase in population? I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
separate, are we selling more stuff?
versus,
Or are
yeah.
we just getting more revenue because we had a higher census number on the state stuff? Do you I mean, I guess if the local's up, that would mean we're selling more stuff,
Right,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
the state share is coming off of, it's based is entirely off the population.
Yeah, okay.
So that's
I got
where, when you remit, you have we've got the, 7% to the state and then 2.75 local sales tax. So we're getting our share of the
Gotcha.
overall from, if all, the cities did a special census, that might change. You know what I mean?
Yeah, percentages, yep.
Right.
All right. Yep, I just wanted to make sure I was thinking about that.
No, absolutely.
Sorry.
No, feel free to interrupt anytime. That's what this is for. So, not sure where I was here. So we talked about intergovernmental, it's increased, but so are the expenses on that side. Other revenues have stayed pretty consistent, except you can see FY19. The main reason that we're so high on FY19's other revenues are the additional land sales we had during the year.
That was the Vanderbilt sale, correct?
Yeah, we had the Vanderbilt sale. Franklin Synergy came in right at year end, just before June 30th. I'm sorry?
Univar happened this year.
That's this year.
Well, because I remember the other thing, though, Vanderbilt, we did budget on last year's.
We
budget,
did.
So it came in, so it was really a wash.
Right.
What we
But that's over budget. So, but we didn't budget for Franklin Synergy. And then I don't think we didn't budget for the sale of land on Warren Street next to Station 4, but we ended up doing a budget amendment later during the year. So we'll move into expenses now. With the city being a service-based organization, salaries and benefits top the categories at 46% of the budget. Payments for debt service account for 22%, and then transfer for schools for operating makes up another 4%. The other operating expenses, including repairs and maintenance, other operating total makes up 20%, including 7% for repairs and maintenance, 3% for utilities, and 2% for supplies. And repairs and maintenance also includes our software maintenance agreements. Budgeted fixed asset purchases make up 8% of the budget, which includes roads paid for out of the infrastructure department. So we've seen salaries and benefits have steady increases each year. So far, we're running under budget due to vacancies and also due to the December health insurance holiday. A new compensation plan and increased cost of benefits also will factor in to these higher costs. And then also our additions to staff have contributed to this increase as well.
One question.
Sure.
Is it possible the next time we go over this, I think it'd be on our debt service breakdown. And then we have the 4% that we have contribution to schools. Is there any way you could break out of our debt portion that you could show us how much is of our debt service is related to?
That's actually in a couple slides ahead, so we'll get to that in just about 2 or 3 slides, I think. A big majority of the salary and benefits increase is not only related to the compensation changes, but also to our headcount changes. Since 2016, full-time positions have increased by 19%, with year-over-year growth of around 4 to 5% annually. You can see in 2016 we had around 820 positions versus around 980 in 2020. And then, as you'd expect, most of these increases are related to public safety and police and fire. So this slide here shows our debt service transfer, and we have the increased budget this year for debt service related to the $58 million SunTrust loan that we issued in 2019. That loan funded various construction projects, including Salem Elementary, Fire Station 11, airport, street projects, and various road improvements and equipment. And then we are in line with budget through December. So this slide, Mayor, shows the debt service paid by the city for schools. And so as you can see from fiscal year 16 to 18, it stayed pretty flat, but then increased by, in FY19 we showed an increase of around 8.5% and then another 6.5% in 2020. And then on the operating side, increased operational costs resulted in an increase to the annual transfer to schools in 2019 by $1.5 million, or about 24%, and again in 2020 by an additional $1.3 million, or an additional 20%. And we do pay this on a monthly basis in equal installments. And this next slide shows here how you can see the total contribution for schools each year as it compares to the property tax. So if you combine the annual debt service and operating transfers, that's what you're seeing here. And as you can see, the contribution stayed flat from 2016 to 2018. And then last year we saw overall between debt service and operating, we saw a 16% increase, and then an additional 13% this year. And as a percentage of property tax, that's that line you see at the top. That's the cost of schools versus property tax. So this year, since our property tax went up, that went down to about 24%. Otherwise, it's been ranging closer to 27 to 30% of the property tax rate.
Speaking of the school system, people have been asking me about, they said they understand we are talking about combining school systems. Are we looking at that? I mean, I have so many people here lately asking me about that. Are we looking at that?
Other people are talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, but we're not entertaining it right now, are we?
I haven't heard the conversation.
Actually, the media coverage that we've recently gotten off of that, I was kind of involved with. And, but the county commission had requested that the state funding that comes to the state not be shared with the local school system in the city of Murfreesboro, that it would only be applied to Rutherford County, therefore removing a great deal of our funding. And when Robert Stevens
Excuse me, Ed, they're asking you to speak in the mic a little bit.
And when Robert Stevens presented that to the state legislature, he asked for the funding, and that it was currently coming to city schools. Mike Sparks made the comment that he's sure if the city didn't receive any funding for it, that they'd be more than happy to sell the school system for $1, I think was what he said, and I jokingly said sold. And but if we don't get the funding, obviously we don't need to have a school system, was my point. And that was the one word that I said that ultimately got on the front page. The the conversation, and I've talked to Dr. Gilbert and Butch Campbell and several people about whether or not the conversation needs to take place, because there's already been some research done as to whether or not it would require a referendum or whether that would be the city's decision to make, and so there is conversation going on about it. Obviously, I think the conversation needs to take place as much for clarification so that the citizens understand what it is that we're talking about, because or what it is they're talking about, because the city does provide services. We have challenges with languages that perhaps the county doesn't, or a more exacerbated situation with languages. We have a situation where we deal with more urban issues than maybe the county might. So there's a difference in services that are currently provided, and I think just the awareness of what that is and the difference in the systems and why it may or may not be conducive to continue having a city school system, or whether or not a potential merger could take place. I think the conversation needs to be had at some point, and that's hopefully what will get initiated through this process.
Let me make just a comment here. Before, we initiate the conversation, I think we'll just make sure that everybody's at the table. If there's, the problem is so much happens outside this group, and, before we start, we need to be very deliberate and make sure that all the parties understand where we're thinking before the assumption is made by comments that we might make, and that weren't intended to be public comments, or are intended to be another intended it to be a joke.
Right.
I mean, because there are lots of people who have invested a great deal in our system. We all agree we have a great school system, and we need to be supportive of their efforts that they're doing on a daily basis before we move any way forward, is to value those people that are doing on a daily basis the job that we've expected them to do, and not only just doing it, but doing it to an exceptional scale. So, I just say, caution all of us to kind of be deliberate about the discussion that we're having.
I'll make one comment. I met with Chairman Campbell, when that came out. Mr. Campbell wanted to come talk. And what I've been telling most people that I speak with, we've not talked about consolidating the school system. I think what we have talked about over the last couple of years, looking at, we've partnered with the county on co-location of county dispatch that, saves Rutherford County residents money and city residents money with dispatch going into the room upstairs. We've partnered on road projects. We're partnering on Blaze and Fortress Drive for a new county clerk's office, and also maybe an annex for some of our city tax collections and a DMV to be on that side of town. So what I had told Mr. Campbell, and if you look at the contribution, and I missed it earlier, I apologize, I looked over this when I was reviewing. Our debt service and contribution to schools, when you include all that, has gone up $4 million over the last really 3 years. And, it makes no sense for the county to build, a $70 million complex, and then us a mile and a half away to build a $40 million complex, because the Rutherford County taxpayer, who 50% of the revenue that the county has coming in is derived from the city of Murfreesboro. And if the state takes away our funding portion that we get for the county not having to educate those kids, then that's a big issue, because we're going to be double taxed for paying for two school systems. So it makes sense, I think, before we have the talk of consolidation, that as the county's building their next complex, how do we partner with them that we don't have to build a school in 2 years? Because, I think it's safe to say, on where we've been over the last 3 years, we can't take another $4 million hit over the next 2 years into our operating budget. So that may be the discussion that we have at another date, to talk with staff to say, give us some options on what that looks like if we partner on construction, or how that we how that we do that. I mean, there was talks at one point that with Salem, that, how would that look, that we look at our agreement on how we're allowing county kids to come into our school, at the same time county kids allowing city kids to come to Barfield, that's 100% pretty much in the city, surrounded by the city, Blackman, how we do that. So that may be the discussion to start on how we're partnering together.
And I agree. I think the sixth grade is one of the things we need to look at, no matter what we do as well. Just because when city school kids, students, advance to the seventh grade, if they're not in the middle school program, well, they're already a year behind on band participation at the middle school. They're already a year behind on football or basketball or cheerleading or whatever it is that they may be involved with. They're behind in that process because basically those kids who were in that school in the sixth grade participated in those programs. So we may be doing a disservice by even having the sixth grade available within our system. The other thing that just off the top of my head comes to mind is maybe there's an opportunity and just within the bus service as far as how we pick students up and deliver them to the schools, because we know that there are certain areas where we have city schools and county school buses running basically the same exact route, and even some buses stopping at the same house to pick up some kids going to a city school and some going to a county school. So the duplication of services, I think, is the easy part to look at, and then whether or not there's a long-term plan of potentially the city getting out of the school business. I mean, I don't think we should say it's not to be considered, but I personally, I know our city school teachers are doing a phenomenal job. I think our administration is doing a great job. But then again, if you'd asked me a couple years ago about Murfreesboro Electric, I'd have said the same thing. They're doing a great job. But it doesn't mean that there's, after review and study, that there may be an opportunity there. So just something I think we need to keep our eyes open to. And as Bill stated very clearly, and I understand, we need to get the right people at the table. And that's what I explained to Mr. Campbell when I was talking to him. Until we get all the people who really understand the challenges that our city school faces, the teachers' involvement, and very much like with the MED, where we looked at basically the ratepayers, the employees, and the city of Murfreesboro. I think we should look at the school system of what's advantageous to the students, what's advantageous to the teachers, and what's advantageous to the city of Murfreesboro. So kind of the same approach, and it may play out completely different depending on what the demand is. So that's just my thoughts on it.
So for the record, are we, as a group, does this constitute that we are considering selling the school system?
No,
I wanna make
no,
that's
no, I
that's a
don't
no,
think so.
right?
No.
That's a no.
All right, so
Scott Broden, you hear
for,
that?
for the record, for the record, let's just, I think the where we are right now is the idea that we know that other people in the community are talking about this. They're, Eddie had the comment, what it is, what it is. It's as far as just being a joke, and it's sort of stirred the pot a little bit. Whatever other people have used it to stir the pot would be my characterization of it. But look, if we want to have a discussion about this, it probably needs to come from a very, like Bill said, a very deliberate angle, and that ultimately we probably need some staff. We probably need staff to put together some information for us one day. I mean, I think bigger picture, one day it's legit, and we'll it's legit for us to mull it. Today we're not mulling it, right?
No, and that's the conversation too, Rick, that we can't, if you talk about sixth grade or you talk about an entire school system, and that's the thing that we can't lose, is what's best for the education of our kids. We can't dump 780 students on the county without having that. They're going to have to deal with it. So, we've got, my stance, and I hope I hear the council saying the same thing. We've gone through a lot of discussions about consolidation over the last couple of years on what's better for the taxpayer, best for the taxpayer, as well as what overall. I mean, the reason we did the co-location upstairs because it's best for the resident when they call 911 that if it can be the county or it can be the city, whoever can get there the quickest is the best. I mean, that's the overall. So, when we're having these discussions, we just know we need to figure out what's best overall for the county and the city. And that's not going to be a discussion that can take place in a month or 2 months. It's going to be years to be able to get that conversation going. But maybe where we start is, we originally the Highway 96 property that now the county, is looking at, that was originally bought for a school site and a fire site. That was a fire station site. That was the main reason that was bought with a park going on. And now, the council, we've really looked at how we're going to progressively handle our annexation to the city limits in the future. And if we know that we're not going to be growing in that area, then the county's going to have to go out there. So that's where we can have that discussion. The school board's going to have to be involved, the city staff, county staff. But, I don't think we want to give the perception that, we've had this discussion about MED and now we're trying to figure out how to get rid of something else. That is not the case. That is not what we're looking to do. We're just trying to make sure that, as we grow forward. Somebody came up to me at the basketball game, and Darren, he was serious. He said, "Hey, I want to introduce you to someone who's interested in buying Murfreesboro Water and Sewer." And I said, "We are not interested in selling Murfreesboro Water and Sewer." So that's we don't want to put that perception out there that we're trying to get rid of things. So, all right, Ms. Tucker. I'm sorry.
Just one more comment, because I think it's my place as the liaison between you and the school, between the city council and school board, is just to remember that we have competent, caring professionals who have served our community and have a wealth of experience with public education. And while, this has to some degree sharpening your pencil and seeing the economic impact of it, there are consequences and impact on the whole concept, like you said, Mayor, of public education and the quality of public education able to provide young people in our community, which is the reason that Murfreesboro decided at one point in time to pull out, because local municipalities had the option to create their own school system, which is how we started, because they could provide certain services to their citizens and that they felt like they could. So I just want to remind us that we have a resource that should not be ignored, should be definitely at the table and included in this whole discussion. Use those individuals that we have who have for years labored to provide quality public education in our system. As we consider this or have that discussion, let's don't not use a resource that's available to us. And the school board, I can tell you, we have a very conscientious school board that works real hard to put that budget together each year. I see them labor, and even though I don't have a vote, I very much appreciate the work that they do. So I just remind us to make sure that that everyone is included in that discussion as we value the public education, because we all value the quality of education that our school system is providing our children, and hopefully going forward we'll continue to do that. But don't deny that resource or ignore that resource of information for us that our administrators and our teachers offer us.
So I want to make clear that we summarize up that I think I hear what council, so we can put this. We are not, nor have we had discussions about consolidating our school system, but we do want to find ways that if there's efficiencies with the county that we can provide value with the county and the city, that's what we want to look at. And moving forward, however that happens, that can be discussions that we all have, but we are not entertaining bringing two systems together right now. So.
Okay. So we'll just look at other expenses now. Other general fund expenses have seen consistent increases over the past 5 years. Repairs and maintenance and fixed assets have seen the highest increases, and that's really due to costs for vehicles and road maintenance. things like software and police technology. Those make up the increased maintenance costs. And then through December, we're under budget. However, these costs are seasonal, and they tend to fluctuate up and down based on things like the weather and timing of our contracts. Road improvements and infrastructure department make up 85% of the fixed asset costs in 2019 and 72% in 2020. So as construction costs continue to rise, we'll see the effects of these increases in both the operating and capital budgets. Again, we're running under budget at this time in this area as well, but expect to see expenses pick up as the spring weather conditions like what we seem to be having today improve and asphalt production resume. So far, y'all have approved a couple of budget amendments related to mainly grant revenues and expenses and grant expenses for fire, police, community development, and recreation. And then we've also amended the budget for the school's technology purchase for around $1.3 million, and expect to send a budget amendment shortly for the solid waste to outsource part of their brush and limb pickup. That contract y'all approved last week. And then our future budget goals include maintaining a balanced budget just by continuing to manage our expenses and introduce new and increased revenues where appropriate. And we should still review the property tax rate annually. And again, we'll base this approach around council's new priorities, which we discussed earlier. So just a recap of what we've discussed so far. So far, key revenues are meeting and slightly exceeding budget, and expenses are meeting or just a little under budget. We can continue to thrive by taking a hard look at our expenses each year and prioritizing projects and expenses based on our needs as they relate to council's priorities. And we should just continue to review revenue streams and make sure they're adequate to keep pace with our growth. That's all I have on the mid-year budget review. Your packets also include the November dashboard report. Since month end's not been processed yet, December information may get adjusted on the next report, but I wanted to go ahead and get you this information now through December, and then December's dashboard will be presented next month rather than this month, since there's so many other departments that contribute to that dashboard report. I want to make sure that we had time to get everything compiled for that. Are there any questions about this or about the November dashboard?
Karen, I've got a question for you. It's going to be out of left field. I don't necessarily anticipate you to have an exact number on this, okay? So
Okay.
fair warning, but, as I was reading through this, it looked like, in summary, we're sort of ahead of where we thought we would be, it seemed like to me. Is that what you would think as far as from a budget standpoint?
Well, so far, but again, so many things are based on season. So, like I said before, our big expenses with repairs and maintenance and road construction, those are likely to shoot up this spring, as the weather allows. So,
But I mean, as it relates to the last budget year,
yeah.
it'd have been the same. We'd had the same scenario last budget year, right? So I mean, if we're ahead now, we would still be ahead, right? I mean, I guess the comment that I wanted to make is if in fact we're gonna have a little bit higher sales, we're gonna have slippage,
Right.
which what we call slippage with the salaries and benefits expense. If we're gonna have some of those things out there, I think it just be very important this year going into the spring and early summer that that we would let that be what it is and end up adding to our fund balance rather than having a lot of budget amendments as we go into April, May, and figuring basically spending that money that we budgeted for just because we budgeted for it,
Right.
right?
right.
I mean, it's I think we were conscientiously, at least in my mind, based on what my thoughts of what the budget process was in the summer, that we were trying to be a little bit more conservative about our, projections on sales tax revenue and all that stuff. And I don't want that to turn into oh, great, we're gonna find a way to spend it right before the end of the year, okay?
Right.
So just, that's my comment about that. I think we all need to be very conscientious. It's middle of January, and man, middle of April is gonna be here before we know it, so.
Right.
Just for what it's worth, okay?
Absolutely.
And I think the only thing I might add to to kind of piggyback on Rick's comment is, as we're talking about looking at a pretty large CIP plan, and I know that's something that's coming up, is finding a way to incorporate, a look at that moving forward in a budgetary line item as we move forward. So, I think that's something that we should consider.
Okay. Well, most of the budget amendments that y'all have approved so far this year have been balanced with revenues and expenses for unexpected grants and things like that. The only other thing was the school technology purchase, which, again, that was to pull it out of CIP and pay for it out of operating, because we saw that that ability to do that and their need to move forward quicker than we were going to move on the FY20 CIP. So that was a big catalyst for why that one came through, and that was not, they did not have corresponding revenues with it. And then, again, and we expect that, which y'all saw that last week. So, but I hear you, and we definitely will, as much as we can, we don't want to send you budget amendments either. So if it's something that pops up that, is out of our control, or something that, we see as a really great opportunity, that's when, y'all will get that along with whatever the project is. So you're seeing both sides of it. But especially as we get later into the year, that's where we try to say, is this something that can wait till the next budget year too? So it's going through that whole budget vetting process for a lot of these bigger projects too that come up, April, May, like you were saying.
Is there another dashboard document? I know I received the first one that came out. Is there?
The November dashboard should have been on the agenda, and
packet, and then she handed out the color one today.
I just gave y'all the presentation since it wasn't ready when the agenda went out. I just printed that out. I didn't print off the November dashboard since it was in the agenda. I'm sorry.
No, I just wanted to commend you for that, because that document, it's the first time I've seen something that's starting to give us a snapshot as to where we are financially. And I think over the years, as we progress with more of these documents, I feel like I'm at least getting some information. I may not understand it all the first time, but I'm beginning to get a better picture as to where we are financially in the city, and I appreciate that. I know that takes a lot of work to get to that place, and what information is helpful, and we'll probably have this document will be revised and improved as we progress. But I really appreciate that. First
Thank
time
you.
I looked at it, I thought, this is moving in the right direction, and I thank you for that.
Well, thank you. And, always, if you have any questions, always feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
And that's all I have.
Okay, let's move into strategic partnerships.
Good afternoon. The City of Murfreesboro has historically funded outside agencies that provide services for economic development, tourism, health, education, welfare, safety, arts and culture, and enhanced public services. A 3-year transitional implementation to strategic partnerships began last year. For fiscal year 2020, the City of Murfreesboro funded organizations at levels consistent to the year before, to fiscal year 19, with notification of potential upcoming changes to process and funds. I've completed a site visit and met with each organization to better define existing partnerships with and the relationship to the city. And I'm working to better manage the leases, agreements, MOUs, things of that nature. It's also very important to identify the value of in-kind services that we share, and we're working to better document some of those values and figures. Today, my goal is to discuss the process for future funding requests in the upcoming budget planning and to recommend alignment that facilitates staff review. In the spreadsheets that were included in your packet, please note that all the amounts listed there were previously approved and have already been dispersed. I included this just for your reference, and I'm not asking for any funding today. I just want to look at the process itself with you in advance of that budget planning. For the upcoming fiscal year for 2021, my recommendation to you is first, to align strategic operating partners with city departments for review of the application and subsequent funding recommendations to be managed through the department's budget. In the attachments in your packet, you can see agencies to be aligned for review and recommendation with community development, economic development, parks and recreation, MPD, city schools, and transportation. This will allow for a more intentional relationship and a partnership, better communication, and reviews of the requests by city staff that interact most with the agency. You'll also see on the spreadsheet notations for agencies that receive federal funding that's administered through the city's community development program, and also that receive money from the county or that have a lease agreement with the city. Secondly, we will align government services partners to the Community Services Division with oversight and cooperation with Rutherford County government. And it's important to note with those that while the city funds county agencies such as PAWS, the county does provide funding to the city for St. Clair Street Senior Center. Third, we will align strategic funding partners to a grant application through the Community Services Division in which goals and objectives are aligned to the funding designation, and an assessment and reporting process ensures that measurable goals and objectives are met. Fiscal year 21 grant to prioritize funding for organizational capacity and for the sustainability of arts and cultural enhancement, and to identify functions better served with in-kind services through cooperative use agreements. And finally, we'll work to track and report in-kind services with all agencies, clarify required insurance and documentation, and in agencies that have the use of property and facilities align lease agreements to property maintenance and inspection reporting. The transitional implementation of this process will be ongoing, and we'll continue to work with our partners to better serve this community. As you know, Murfreesboro is an amazing community with wonderful organizations and a lot of heart. The city's role in working with community partners has many benefits, and the process that we approach this funding and how we work together with these community agencies can be key to its success. And I welcome any questions.
I'll just make a general comment. I appreciate the attention that's gone into the thoughtfulness of trying to really focus on where those monies are going and how to really align that with what's good for the community and to really account for those dollars in a very meaningful way. And I want to thank everybody that's had a hand in doing that. I think it's a really good process. So,
Thank you. A lot of people contributing for sure.
Any question, Ms. Jackson? Thank you.
Thank you.
While we've got Angie up here on a completely different subject, I just got a call a little while ago from somebody from Walter Hill, and they were talking about the park and the things that are going on out there. And they asked the question of, do we have any plans to improve the roadway going into the park?
We do. We have some immediate plans. Nate might be able to speak more to the specifics, but we recognize that that is a need for sure.
And is there any timeline on those plans?
So we met about that yesterday. We're looking at getting Rollins out there very soon. We figured out some funding in our capital budget that we might be able to reprioritize that was savings from other projects. So that's something actually I think we're taking a look at and meeting with them this week just to get an idea of what it would take to do that.
I would assume with the increased traffic and stuff that we've seen with the trailhead and stuff out there that we've probably seen more traffic. So
we do have, we have long-term plans for the park, but there is some immediate attention with signage and access, and that's something actually, like I said, we met about that yesterday.
Erosion control would be one of the priorities with the road construction so that we don't wind up placing something there that immediately erodes away as it has in the past. So,
yes, sir.
The road and parking itself, we have some terrific in-house resources. Ms. Emberson in the back hopefully can contribute some of her skills to that as well. She made some key improvements at the senior center and redrawing how that parking was done and working with us for some significant cost savings and hoping to ask for some help there in the future as well.
All right, good question. All right, we'll move to anticipated proposed solid waste ordinance revisions.
Mayor, council, thank you. This is something I tend to do at the Water Resources Board. Before I ask you all or prepare a final draft or come up with some hard recommendations, kind of float the 30,000 foot level concepts out to you to let you kind of think upon those and get your feedback over time. And if everything looks good to you, then we can move more into that final draft of the ordinance. But we've had a lot of changes in solid waste, and a lot of I've been exposed in the past year and a few months to a department that I had not maybe appreciated as much, the challenges and so forth that it's experienced out there. You all have been very supportive in allowing us to look at the brush and limb subcontracting services and the fee structure implementation. Consolidated utility district has been key and vital in being able to bill for that service. But I felt after about 15 or 16 months in this position, I felt Joey's been on me saying, hey, let's get this ordinance changed, and I felt like I needed to get a little bit of time behind the wheel before we brought these to your attention. So that's what I'm doing today, is kind of giving you the big picture stuff on some proposed ordinance revisions, and I'm going to dovetail that into a solid waste management solution that kind of works in conjunction, or it's tethered to the ordinance revisions we're suggesting. So I'm going to probably go through the next two items kind of together jointly, and then we can stop and you can ask questions or we can discuss the issues. So before going into that, I just wanted to kind of show you the review of our solid waste cart count. This is the table that's in the memo, but the purple line is how many people have opted out. We've had about almost 1,000 carts opt out of being picked up in the city in the past 6 months. We have had just about 533 new services, and then there's actually been about 132 carts that have been purchased as a second cart, primarily for residential purposes. So we've gone from about 45,100 carts in July, and we're down to about 44,350. So roughly whatever that is, 750 cart less than what we had 6 months ago. That has allowed us to actually reduce one of our rear loader routes downtown. I think, am I correct, Joey? We have 4 rear loaders running now versus what we had is 5? Went from 4 to 3. Okay, so that's an efficiency we've picked up there. So see, this is some of the pictures I wanted to I've maybe sent some of this to you all in the past. These are some poor, I'll call this poor solid waste management practices that some folks have employed around town. You can see when something's that close to a vehicle, our folks don't pick it up. If it's that close to a mailbox, when they're overfilled like that, it can be, it definitely hurts our level of service and our efficiency. Similarly, with brush, limb, and yard waste pickup, you can see there's we do have a 8-inch or 8-inch or less diameter requirement on the thickness of limbs. Having the grass thrown up by the curb. There was somebody put some hedge apples out there. So you can. This is how we. I wanted to show you how we pick. Mister, we won't name names.
Well, that's Mr. Lalance's house with a tree limb.
So I put the picture of our clamshell, our grapple hook here to show you that you can see that it's designed to pick up brush and limb, and it's not designed to pick up crab apples or grass clippings. So that really does hurt our efficiencies as well when there's kind of those bad practices employed. So, yes, ma'am.
I know this is an obvious answer probably, but the 1,000 that opted out, what are they doing?
They went to they would have had to have gone to a private service. That was primarily the commercial. When we went to $30 a cart per month on the commercial customers, those customers that had 15 and 20 carts, which were apartment complexes, mobile homes, a lot of places that really should have had a dumpster. They it was more cost effective for them to get a dumpster versus using our 96-gallon
Yeah, I was
containers.
thinking residential. I said, that doesn't make
No,
sense.
no, no, it wasn't, it was not. No, there were several that may have had 2 carts that went down to 1, but the bulk of that, the majority of that was the commercial. So part of the solid waste ordinance revisions is that we would require all grass clippings to be bagged in biodegradable yard waste bags year-round. Yeah. All leaves bagged between January 1st through October. I think my memo said January 15th, but really leaf season where we're out getting loose leaves is between October 16th and December 31st. Yeah, I know. My memo's wrong. I think we had a meeting, so my memo says January 15th, but I'm saying, and the final draft of this would have the correct date. I made a couple of changes here before after I sent you the memo. We would want those bagged up between January and October, and then we would use the leaf machines between October and December, which is the peak season. Not require that. Again, these are staff level. This is how we've reviewed it at staff. If there's problem, that's why I'm presenting it to you today. If you don't like what you're hearing or you prefer something different, this is opportunity to get with me and Joey and whomever. We want to further clarify that private lawn and tree service establishments must not place grass clippings or brush at the curb for city pickup. I've had some debates on whether our ordinance is clear. Nurserymen is somewhat of an antiquated term, but we want to make sure that it's very spelled out that when you hire somebody, they're responsible for hauling it off. Yes, ma'am.
For the people who don't do this, is there a penalty we're going to enforce? Or, I know it's going to make their neighborhood look terrible if they refuse to just leave the stuff out there.
Right. Well, that gets into kind of the next discussion item, which is that
All right.
that waste management solution, which is it's really, I'll get there in a minute.
Okay.
This is just kind of this is the fee schedule that we want to establish by resolution, and the ordinance would refer to a resolution. When we look at the brush, limb, and yard waste collection, that anything 6 by 6 by 6 feet or 8 cubic yards or less would be free. Once you started getting up into taking 2/3 to a full load at the boom truck, that would be for residential a $25 or $50 per load fee. Now, I know I've had discussions with someone just this morning about what if you had several, there's certain residential areas that several, I guess, residences use a common area to pick up, and that's not intended to start charging people for that. It's really intended for someone who has cut a full tree down or has done taken up a full knuckle boom load of material, that they would be charged for that. Commercial would be the $150 per load. Bulk item collections would be $15. We start charging for bulk item collections $15 per item per the list there.
Do we pick up sofas and mattresses?
Yes, sir, we do. You can call and set up an appointment, and I did it just the other day because I found out we did it, and so I had a ping pong table that was broke and a mattress, and I called and made an appointment, and they told me when they'd be there, and they picked it up for me on the front of my lawn.
You did that?
I did that. It's free. It's that we have a dedicated bulk item pickup boom truck.
It's free. Not know that.
If you had picked up.
Based on this, I would have paid $30 for that service for the 2 items that would just picked up. We're proposing that would be no longer a free pickup, but you could call and schedule an appointment like you do now, but it would just be added to your monthly bill.
You'd be surprised.
Do we have that? Does that happen a lot? People call and schedule to pick up mattresses? Wow.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes, sir.
You have a slide in here that's going to talk about how we're going to collect this?
Well, that's going to be, yes, the waste management solution where the driver is going to be able to tag the picture, and then So I do have a process that I want to at least verbalize and outline to you.
Can I just jump ahead real quick?
Sure.
To make sure I'm focusing my attention in the right direction.
Uh-huh.
Is this resolution in front of us today?
No,
Okay.
no. This is just staff's crafting a first draft of proposed recommended changes. And if, again, based on the amount of dialogue I received from you, will determine if we get it to a final draft or if you all want to see some changes. This is just me putting some concepts out there.
Darren, I may be
Yes, sir.
jumping a slide ahead, but noticeably missing is TVs, and I know that we often see the big screen TVs and the hazardous material type stuff out on the roadway. Would it be handled the same way at just a different rate?
You know, and that's a good question. Right now, the county, you can take your TVs and your electronics to the county convenience center, and they charge you for those. We have not picked those up as a bulk item pickup.
You have to keep them separate.
We had to, we would probably, I'm speaking out loud and off the cuff, but I would think that we would still tell folks to,
Stand up.
who's got it up?
Joey.
Joey? That we would still direct them to the convenience center versus allowing them to bring it as a bulk item.
You're gonna talk, come to the microphone.
Might address refrigerators and stuff like that as well, because there's some issues with Freon and stuff when you talk about
Yeah.
refrigerators or air conditioners and stuff like that.
Grab a seat, Joey.
Well, in the ordinance, we do not pick up any white goods. Now, TVs and stuff, they go to 1140 Haley Road. Now, when we do a special cleanup, whether it be hazardous waste or any of that stuff, that's the reason why we have two hazardous waste roundups. We'll have one this March, and then we'll have another one depending on when the LSU Alabama game is next year. But those are two that they're free. Last year we had over 500 cars come through our hazardous waste roundup just last fall. It's open for everybody in Rutherford County. But TVs, we just sort of bring them. Now, if we have to clean them up, what we do is we go and pick them up in a pickup truck because they're not legal to dump at the landfill. So we go and then we end up taking TV to 1140 Haley Road, and we pay a disposal.
That's where, again, I don't think we want to get, the hazardous waste, we have special events
Right.
for people to dispose of those, and I think there's a special process to dispose of electronics, and we want to probably keep those separate versus what we would consider our standard curbside services from solid waste. And there's always an ongoing public education component to let people know if they really do call for the bulk item collection, we just need to be, what are you asking to dispose of? And if they say a TV or whatever, then we can direct them to a different, no, you need to go dispose of that yourself at Haley Road and pay the fee.
Yeah, I think the challenge is currently the public's unawareness of the
Right.
situation. And obviously, Airport Road has had a TV sitting on it for probably 6 months. And then Lynn Street, somebody sent me an email the other day with a picture of 4 TVs on Lynn Street. And I think it was behind a church or something where they took donations. People had donated TVs that apparently were unusable or they didn't want them, so they just basically put them back out on the curbside there.
Right.
So,
Right.
so somehow there has to be an educational process so that the public understands that TVs are kind of off limits as far as roadside pickup or.
Yes. Well, part of this automated,
just coming out of the
part of this
county, throw it in the
automated waste,
ditch, I guess.
right, part of this automated waste management system is going to be documenting customer service delivery issues and sending notifications and letters, and there's going to be a getting our legs underneath us period, which is going to be, just like with the fee, it's going to be painful. So just so putting all this on paper in an ordinance does not translate into the public knowing about it and changing their behavior. So the automated waste management system I'll bring up is really, we're going to give some grace period, but this is going to allow us to have some real-time photos, real-time vehicle tracking, tie things to people's accounts, maybe give them a couple of strikes before we go into a full enforcement kind of mode. But I think that's why we've got to have this, they're too tethered. putting it on paper is one thing, implementing it out in the road and educating the public and changing behavior is something totally different. Yes, ma'am.
What about as an idea, on the water bill, put in bold, a change in pickup, have the phone number, and when they call, not necessarily having a human being answer the phone, but have a recording with some of this on it.
We can definitely, we use
That's
bill.
a good way, because everybody
yeah.
gets their water bill.
Bill stuffers, we use those, we employ those consistently. So yes, ma'am, we can put before we enforce or go into full, billing this or codifying it 100%, we will get some education out there. If the council has given us the thumbs up on where we're headed, we can definitely reach out to the public through mailers and inserts.
So no one would say they didn't know.
Right, and I think even when we put the ordinance in place, and we may have the ability to enforce it and charge people certain things, I think we have a grace period, and we just give them the letter and say, hey, just FYI, this is no longer allowed. Here's a picture in front of your residence. I think brush, limb, and yard waste pickup, the grass clipping thing is going to be big. That's probably going to cause the most wailing and gnashing of teeth, I would say. And we do want to just say, hey, please change behavior. This is no longer accepted, and give a couple of grace passes, and then start charging.
Since we just went biblical, I guess I'll go ahead and make some comments too. Look, I'm gonna give you my gut reaction on a few of these different items here, so take for what it's worth and go forward however, what everybody else says. But I think, for me, first thing is an easy one, is that we shouldn't be sending a pickup truck out to pick up TVs today, tomorrow.
Right.
Like immediately stop going to pick up TVs and carrying to Haley Road for people. That for no cost. I don't think that just don't seem like that should be defined in what we do for waste management for people. So this is just my.
Oh yeah, no,
this is
we
just my
shouldn't.
thoughts, okay?
I just learned that we were doing that
Would
too.
be something that I'd give up today. Okay. The bulk item stuff. Well, let me put it this way: of the things that you've talked about, I would probably separate two of these things. The speedier we want to get some of these things done. For me, the bulk item collection, I could probably go ahead and deal with that ordinance today too. Like I feel like, yeah, I'd implement that today. The grass clippings, what I like, look, I'm not a fan of bagging the grass clippings. Okay, that's just I'm gonna say that's my status on that.
You don't like to bag
But
the grass?
here's what I would be in favor of I would say that would be the case, especially if we can figure out a way to enforce what the problems are. The pictures up here, to me, we already have ordinances in place that say you're not supposed to do that. And so if we're not enforcing it, and the sewers get stopped up, and we can't pick it up and a knuckle boom stands at one house for all day long. You've heard me make statements in these meetings and our regular meetings. Do not sit there for all day long picking up that big old pile of 8-inch, 10-inch trees, at somebody's place. So for me, I would rather start to try to enforce what we've got in place now. As far as just the leaf thing, and I know it's tough.
Well,
right?
the ordinance. The size of the diameter of the trees and the length of the brush. We're only supposed to do 6 foot by, or maybe it's 8 foot by 6-inch diameter is the max. But there's the ordinance as it currently reads says it's preferred that you bag the grass. It is not a mandate. There's nothing enforceable there with the grass or the leaves.
So, I think what I don't is bagging the grass. I guess what I'm trying to get at is if there's a better way for us to say this is the way you do it to not get in those problems, because those are really the issues, not necessarily.
I'll tell you what I know about the grass, and I hadn't been out there collecting the grass, so I haven't been out there on nose and grindstone doing it. the leaf pickup machines aren't strong enough to suck the grass up when it gets wet and when it gets matted down. So unless we want to go, and now there's talking with Joey, there's supposedly these super vacuum suckers, right? That'll do it. But do we want to go into that? I mean, do we want to go buy how many of those do we need to go purchase to cover the whole city? If we continue to use the fleet that we have, which is the knuckle boom, it's just a very non-efficient way to do it. So we can keep doing it. It just means somebody's going to have to grapple it and get it in there, and then one of our guys, will have to go out and sweep it up because people get upset if you just pick it up and leave a little bit of a debris out on the curb line. They want it to be cleaned. So it's just a slow go.
Isn't there something we talked about putting it in the regular trash cans or a separate container or something? Did we talk about that at one point?
If we did that, it would just mean, again, I don't remember talking about that.
Yeah, we talked
About putting it in a grass, putting it in a
like a green trash can
that you could put it in.
Like that? I thought I remembered
We
something
did.
like that.
Okay, okay.
We talked about that and about instead of running a knuckle boom truck, if we did go to grass clippings, that somebody could go around literally with a flatbed with a trailer and loading those bags onto a trailer as opposed to having to knuckle boom them up every.
The thing about the biodegradable bags is if we're having trouble leaving grass out on the curb and it's getting so wet that we can't pick it up with the vacuum, the bags are going to get so wet that when you try to pick them up with a knuckle boom, aren't we going to run into?
Not it works well, and this is I don't know how and this may be something we need to look at, but the street department is the keeper of the leaf trucks, all right? So they really run that fleet. The guys who mow the grass, right, in the right of way through the spring and summer and fall, they're the ones running the leaf trucks between October 15th and January 1st. So they're the ones. So that's kind of, instead of mowing grass, they're just picking up these leaves, and so we have a fleet of leaf collection equipment that really, if you wanted to be just candid about it, probably only really gets used those 3 months out of the year. So if you wanted to start trying to utilize that fleet to suck up grass throughout the spring, summer, and fall, it just, again, it kind of means resources and time, and you have to have bodies to man that equipment while the other folks are out cutting the grass. You have somebody still going around collecting the clippings of the grass. So it's a season. The thing I've learned about this whole situation is it's really tough because you have high peak season, and you don't want to staff up or get specialized equipment that you're only going to use for just a few months out of the year, because that's very inefficient and ineffective. But there's a level of service that the city residents expect. And so a lot of this is, if we want to get more efficient and effective, the community is going to have to help us.
Well, maybe it's just not picking up grass clippings.
Well, can I make one comment? I mean, I want to put this from more to a planning commission side. Y'all know where I stand. I mean, I think it needs to be bagged up. I think that as we go through, and we have some subdivisions that have narrower streets, and you've got that neighbor who every week they pile their trash up, starting at their next door neighbor's property line and go all the way down, which is the way it works. I mean, they're putting it at the light pole in between their neighbors so they don't put it on their driveway and mailbox side, and then it goes halfway down their lot throughout the week, and then it rains, and then it stinks. And so the thing I think that's the issue from a development standpoint, we require any developer and contractor to protect the curb inlets to make sure that no mud, gravel, or debris go down the storm sewer. And I don't think there's any difference between the water quality on our storm to make sure that we're requiring one segment to make sure that you keep your streets clean and you protect your curb inlets. And then we've got subdivisions that completely put everything in the street that stop up the storm drain. So we get issues where, and the other thing with that, we get issues that we're stopping up our storm drain, that we're causing drainage issues. And then the other thing, I have this one lady who emails me just about on a weekly basis throughout the summer that customers on Cason Lane will put all of their grass clippings and their leaf clippings in the bike lanes. So you've got all these bike lanes throughout the city, and people are having to go around the bike lanes into the main traffic because of the bike lanes. So at least if we have them bagged, you still can use those. So
I'm in favor of that, and I just think that's the proper way to handle it. Joey, what does the other cities do around us?
They normally pick up leaves during leaf season and brush. Grass is generally in the south, not even collected. Period. Because it's just like if you go in, we'll just give an example of Garrison Cove. I can go in there today and pick up 10 loads of grass, and tomorrow I've got 10 other neighbors that cut their grass on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday you got somebody else. It's a never-ending cycle as far as grass is concerned. But most communities like Franklin and them, they do not put it out there. As far as carts are concerned, I know in Decatur that they just put yard waste, clippings and stuff in a 96-gallon cart. The reason being is grass, when it's cut and it's wet and it gets in the cart, it will not dump and it will stick to the side, and then you've got a real good smell probably in about another day or two, especially in the hot summertime, just because of the.
I'm brainstorming here.
Oh, yeah.
But I would tell you, I'm not. The smell that they can wash their cart if they want to have a cart and put their grass clippings out. I mean, here's
Right.
what I would say: if we're going to pick up grass clippings, I remember when this came up a couple years ago. It was in one of these meetings, so it was pretty not too long ago, because I think we talked about it in this room, if I remember right. But I can remember the emails that I got, and it was typically pretty much all of them were based around physical capability.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of people who said, I'm not physically capable of getting, that amount of grass and getting it from my yard out to the road very easily, at least. If somebody, maybe what if we just added a cart that you could get, or you just don't get your grass clippings picked up? You just say, hey, this is your cart. Maybe we ventilate it a little bit or something. It's a little different design. I don't know what look, I'm just, again, brainstorming here, but we put that on the list of stuff that you can pay for.
Wouldn't that
you
be
want an extra $10 a month?
Wouldn't that be easier to have where our side boom trucks could pick up yard waste as opposed? Because the one thing we're not taking into account too, we're picking up all of this grass with our knuckle boom, and then you can clearly see on these streets that we're having to maintain, that we're digging into the asphalt. When we're
Or we scrape it.
yeah. So, and we're the ones who have to maintain that asphalt long term. So it seems like that if there was a way that you could have one truck that's, they don't even have to get out. They pick it up, dump it, and go.
You just add it to the list of services you can-
what I'm hearing is you're saying we would just provide a 96-gallon cart and everybody's brush and limb and grass clippings has to fit into that 96-gallon cart, or are you saying just yard? They still get to put the limbs and the brush and everything else that they trim up and we pick those up with the knuckle booms, and then this would be another 96-gallon cart that would be just grass clippings.
Well, I think you could say grass and leaves.
Grass and leaves.
Yeah, again, I'm just kind of brainstorming here. I'm just trying to think. These are the things that I know we need to take into account.
Yeah, I put all my leaves in my 96 gallon.
If you grind them
And then
up,
you could opt out of it.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be something that everybody would do. You just say, well, look, if you want to have this service, it's going to be $10 a month, and we'll pick your grass clippings up.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't use it. My grass clippings stay on the yard. I don't pick all my grass clippings up. But
Yeah, okay, well, that's the kind of feedback we're looking for.
I'm just trying to think out loud here, but
If it's if it's something that we want to charge as a service, as a different service and a different container, that's something we can do. There would just be a setup fee and then the monthly fee, and then when you mention leaves, I don't know how many leaves. Again, they would only have to. The leaf season pickup, the big leaf fallout between October and January, we would still be coming around and doing what we do now. The leaves between January and October.
Go ahead. I want to make sure. I'm not for saying we're gonna. There's already the perception, and I think it's right that we added this $7.50 a month fee to pick trash up, and raise property taxes, at the same time. And then if we're going to say that we're not picking grass clippings up without adding another fee on top of that, I mean, what I would think that if we're going to continue to pick grass up, we have to be more efficient if we require and say, if you want us to pick your grass up, here's what the fee is to buy a container, and we'll come around and pick your grass up, whatever a 96-gallon costs, then I would think that has to be more efficient if we're not having knuckle boom trucks go around, that we just have the side loaders that go around like you're picking trash up, that has to be more efficient. And if your container is full, then you're going to have to wait to the next week.
Is it a problem, Joey, mixing the grass clippings with the solid waste? I mean, you'd have to have the same. You'd have to have the same side loader picking up municipal solid waste and the grass. You couldn't. Otherwise, you would
be on different rotations though. Like you'd be in quadrant A doing your grass pickup. At the same time, you'd be in quadrant B doing your trash pickup with different trucks.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, what you'd to keep it clean so that you could go through, because all that grass right now goes to our mulch facility on Florence Road. So we grind that up and we give it out to the resident. With a garbage truck, the reason why we separate the grass and leaves is the 25% diversion that we're mandated by the EPA going into Middle Point landfill. To give you an example, we do almost 40,000 tons of garbage last year that went to Middle Point. My numbers right now with the storms that we had, we're at like over 42,000 tons that we mulched last year. So we're actually, when you look at diversion in landfilling, we're probably about 120% to our good. Now, it only counts because it's all of Rutherford County and all the tonnage, but for the city of Murfreesboro, our diversion rate from our yard waste collection is top notch. Now, it's not what some people call recycling, but we are diverting that from a landfill. You do the two trucks, you're going to have two just to keep it clean, or we take that grass that goes into the landfill, which will add to our tonnage going to the landfill.
Yeah, okay, well, it may not work. I'm brainstorming. But
Well, and I appreciate it. And again, this is not. We can have further discussion on this if you want to. We can keep moving on to kind of keep the meeting moving. But
is everyone okay that we'll continue with this, but maybe have staff come back? Have staff come back with some different options for us on grass pickup?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to do something.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
we got to do something. It's just a matter of kind of how's the best way to do it. Look, guys, I would honestly, I remember this from a couple years ago being something that I thought was, that had merit from a standpoint of some of those physical limitations and stuff like that. And so somehow I'd like to address that if we can. I think that's real, I mean, it wouldn't be real for me. I mean, I can get them out there, but it's real for a lot of people. And so I'd want to take that into account somehow. That's kind of what I was thinking about the roller thing anyway, but I know we got to do something, so I appreciate it.
And I guess my point is sometimes conditions are different in the hood than they are in the more affluent neighborhoods. And what I mean by that is that we don't have curb and gutter issues. There's no problem with stuff running off in the sewer because we have no curbs. But there is a situation that when the stuff flows down the ditch and the water from the ditch flows across the road, then, a year or so back I was out there scraping grass clippings up out of an intersection with a shovel, putting them in a trash can and hauling them back to my house. And a person stopped and they said, is this a requirement of city council to clean up the streets? And I said, well, I just came through here a little while ago on a motorcycle, and the motorcycle just as well been driving across butter, and my fear is I've got neighbors who do the same thing, and one of them's going to be laying in the road out here if I don't fix the problem. So there is a situation there that different areas are unique, and so there's probably not one blanket that's going to cover every situation. Also, I can tell you that every person who seems to move out of Doosan on the way between Doosan and Memorial Boulevard decides, hey, I don't need this mattress and I don't need this TV, and they throw it in this vacant lot that's on the side of the road there. And everybody back there's nodding their head in codes and stuff, and if we don't pick those TVs up, who's going to do it?
Right.
I mean, I don't want to have to go do it because that would be one more thing added to my agenda, and it's about full.
Right.
But if we're going to pick up the TVs, which I think we should, let's go ahead and charge to haul them to Haley Road, whatever Haley Road's going to charge us to dispose of them, plus a little more, so that it could be added to this list.
Item list.
But, I mean, it's no different than carrying leaves to the brush pile and garbage to the trash, to the dump. And, it just be, if we're going to run a pickup truck by and pick it up, take a picture of it and deal with it exactly like you would a chair or a mattress or a sofa, and send them a bill for disposing of that TV. And, I feel sorry for the property owner, but if the property owner who has the unsupervised property there that's catching all the trash, they need to be responsible for it. And somehow, if this trash is getting dumped on their property, then they either need to be responsible for regularly cleaning their property up, or if the city's going to do it, then we need to be compensated for doing it. So,
Yeah, I'm all right doing it, but not doing it for free and then paying somebody to get rid of it.
Right.
That's what I would not do ever again.
But you said don't pick it up at all, and I
No,
don't want us to get to the
tomorrow,
point we
yeah,
don't
Well,
pick
no,
it up because
we've gotten those.
It's not going to disappear.
Well, we've gotten those calls, and there's definitely times when it's just in a site that nobody's claiming responsibility, and we have to just take care of it from a public welfare standpoint, and we're going to continue to do that. I mean, we can't just ignore those kind of situations, so we will continue to do that. And I don't think it's a bad idea to put, if we want to do electronic appliances or whatever for pickup, we would just have a different fee for that. The grass clipping thing, we can continue to do the grass clipping thing as is and as we've always done it. It just, the idea was to create a more efficient and effective, to gain some efficiencies and effectiveness by having the public help package that differently so that our means of picking it up is enhanced. If we say leave it as is, we've just got a brush, limb, and yard waste subcontracted service, and that is, increased our resources to do this level of effort so that we will have better levels of service. This was just, again, a means to try to get further efficiencies. We can keep doing it as we're doing it right now.
When it comes to appliances, probably not microwaves, but like washing machines and refrigerators and washers and that type of stuff. One of the few recyclables that still has some value is the metals.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you can simply go on Craigslist, and there's people that'll come by and pick up
Yeah,
appliances. So if you want those done for nothing, you can get that done for nothing pretty much. But but getting rid of a TV in the city of Murfreesboro, if you're gonna go to Haley Road, it's just
Can't do it.
virtually impossible.
Right.
I'll just make a quick comment. Whatever solution, I'm going to kind of trust staff to come up with a good solution or at least a good recommendation. I wouldn't be for expanding services, and I know in some cases that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about cost recovery on what we have existing.
Right.
But any solution that would expand the service of what we're doing from a solid waste collection standpoint, I would personally want to avoid, because I think that's the spirit of what we've done by recovering the fees and other things as far as trying to not expand that service and increase the cost of what we're doing. The only other thing I'll say is on the bulk collection, somebody's going to have 4 items picked up at $15 a clip. Did you look at a larger front end? This is what a minimum fixed cost to send a truck out to do this and the manpower to do it, and maybe a less per item charge.
We could do that.
Just look at that.
Yeah.
Because, $15 is probably not recovery for whatever it takes to send people and equipment out to do that.
Right.
But just off the top of my head, $25 and then $5 an item as you go, whatever you think appropriate. Just
Gotcha.
suggestion.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I agree with Ronnie, but also I recommend staff look at what Nashville does, look at Mount Juliet, other surrounding counties, because you know what, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's just keep it plain, keep it simple.
Very good.
Okay. You have
All right.
anything, Lee?
Keep,
Let
yep,
me just
okay.
make
Yep.
one. I was trying to think of the right time to share this, but and this kind of speaks to just motivating and what's happening here. We talk about brush in the street and clippings in the street, but I had a citizen call me probably within the last week. In her neighborhood, she was driving late at night and no street lights, and turned a corner and took off. and ran into limbs that were in the street. One of the limbs went through her windshield on her passenger side. And she's an older lady and said just the day before she had her grandchild in there. And she said it totaled her car, by the way, having run into this. And she was trying to see what is the recourse that she had. And I said, talk to your insurance company, but I don't know what the city recourse is. But anyway, the point I wanted to make was that people, when we see stuff in the street, it's not something we just drive around. We need to let somebody know, get it out of the streets, because there may be more than just inhibiting the drainage. It could actually be a hazard for people, because, you know, when we see it during the bright of day, it's one thing, but at night, when there is no street lights, people like she ran right in the middle of it, and before she knew what was happening, she was in a bunch of leaves, and she'd taken pictures, you know, to kind of see what was show people the next day what had actually happened, and so she shared those with me. So if anybody wants to see those, I've got them. She sent them to me. But I think, you know, when we see something in the streets like this, don't just pass it by. Let somebody know so that hazard is removed, so that we don't have something tragic happen as a result of this.
Very good. So just a couple other minor issues. We would incorporate, you all approved that solid waste collection design criteria in July of last year. We would incorporate that into the solid waste, and then establish our discontinuation of service defined with the billing, the discontinuation of service with Murfreesboro Water and CUD policies, since that's really the billing agency. Okay, so the automated waste management solution, this is just, again, a quick overview here. This is where there's several of these, a driver app and a navigation tools that does the vehicle tracking, real-time route updates, service confirmation, route assist, and pictures. Big thing, pictures with timestamp and location. When the driver takes these pictures, it gets sent back to a dispatcher or manager, and they have a portal so they can see where the vehicles are. They can have real-time communication with the picture, or, you know, downloading the pictures, communication with drivers, and as customer service issues come in, they will have those issues and pictures associated with that, so that they can reconcile that dispute or reconcile that service delivery issue. So it's to provide us, ultimately to provide better customer service, to reset the expectations of the customers and how we deliver those services, and to promote best practices with our customer base. You know, again, to be more efficient and effective, we need help from the public to start, you know, setting things up so that we can pick them up without as much effort. So this is what we're trying. You know, this is just kind of some good pictures of some good practices of some things that have been out there that are very easy, and it will help us enhance efficiencies in the curbside delivery. So this is the only action I'm asking for the council today, is that we've developed a request for competitive sealed proposals, where we're looking at a weighted criteria. 30% would be on the functional requirements as defined there in the table. 20% would be the implementation experience and the vendor support, and then 50% would be cost of the actual automated solution. Like I said, there's several out there. We looked at doing a joint purchase deal with somebody that was working with Memphis and Atlanta. But when I investigated it further, I just thought the best route would be to go out and do this competitively and assess everything. And so the timeline would be issue the RFCSP mid-February, maybe earlier, go through kind of an evaluation process, and then bring it to City Council mid-May. And you would see at that point, that would be the actual approval of, if you so chose to approve it, where it would kind of show you the vendor that was selected, the costs, and the capability of the system. All we're asking for today is really just to get your approval. I think the code requires you to approve the request for competitive sealed proposal process, and so we would just put that has been developed by staff, so no cost associated. We've done that in-house. put that out on the street and let these vendors start chewing on it to see if their solution, they want to put a proposal together for us to consider. So that we would be bringing those proposals back to you all before obviously any money's committed or any action is taken, any contracts are signed or whatnot. So that's really, we're just asking today for that approval to issue the proposal.
All those, Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance. Mr. Martin. Mr. Shacklet. Mr. Smotherman. Mr. Wade. Mayor McFarland.
All right, we'll move to item 5. We have draft water sales contract with Marshall County.
Yeah, this was something that was brought to me by a consolidated utility district. We're obviously not connected with Marshall County. They have a moratorium in place right now on home connections for water. They are connected to CUD's system. CUD, based on their issues with the Corps of Engineers and the fact they hadn't gotten their new contract signed, was averse to selling this 200, I'll keep going through it. It's a 216,000 gallon per day contract. We are in a better situation with our Corps contract now, and really, and I don't want to get into the weeds here, but based on the fact that we have the new state law that gives us return flows credit, and the Corps is actually looking at accepting the state's water rights position on return flows crediting, we may actually have a surplus of water based on our current contract. 216,000, we've got a 20 million gallon a day plant, so 216,000 gallons a day is about 1% of our production capacity. This would be a limited term contract with Marshall for 5 years. This is really to allow them to get a water plant constructed so that they can support themselves. I don't think I would be supportive of it if it was a perpetual contract with no end in sight. So right now, this is a change from the memo. I just got an updated cost. Our wholesale rate we've developed through our cost of service consultants is $2.35 per 1,000 gallons. CUD would actually have a transmission rate of $1.17. So that combined cost there would be what Marshall County would have to accept as a price per 1,000. We would, again, to make sure that they were on track, I think develop milestones along the way to kind of say if you need to get TDEC plans approval of your plan at the 3-year mark to trigger the first year extension, and maybe you have to actually have the bids let for the water plant construction at the year 4 mark to trigger the 2nd year extension. That again is just keeping them accountable that they are moving forward in good faith to actually get off of the need for us to sell it to them. And again, we would have conditions in there that would allow, they would have to restrict flows if we asked our residents to restrict flow because of drought or any other conditions. They would have to do a commensurate reduction, and we would adjust that sales price. We do a cost of service study every other year, and we could just adjust those rates as we develop that cost of service study. So again, I haven't developed a final contract. I've been working with Roman and legal. We've got a draft together, but I wanted to get you all's input before we went to get into that final contract draft. If you all did not see it as something you wanted us to move forward with, or if you had some conditions that you wanted us to incorporate, just wanted to bring it before you to discuss it.
I told Mr. Gore, is there any risk to us that things with the Corps could change over a 5-year period?
No, I think even in the memo in the contract, what I've always said with the Corps of Engineers, the risk dealing with the Corps is a contractual risk. There's really not a natural resource issue with the size of the lake or the ability to withdraw water from the lake. It really is just dealing with the bureaucracy of a federal agency that could cause some issues.
Well, my concern would be that, if we were in drought conditions and we're sending water to Marshall County, and then we start telling our people, hey,
right,
don't water your yards. So, my thought was a 1-year contract with 1 year renewals would be better as opposed to locking us in for 5 years. And, with some kind of something in there that just says if there's an act of, an act of God or something
Yep.
that happens that, our first responsibility is to the residents of Murfreesboro. And if we can help Marshall County, that's great. But we need to have something in there that protects us, that if something that no one thinks about. I mean, if our water treatment plant got, who knows, if a tornado went through and decimated our water treatment plant, we need to make sure that we've got something that protects the residents of Murfreesboro, that we can say, can't do that.
Right. I absolutely agree, and the fact that this is only, like I said, such a 1% of our production capacity,
Sure.
again, it gives me some level of comfort that it's just not that much water impact. I don't know necessarily if we'll even be able to, other than the meter that CUD would have with Marshall County, that's the only way we're going to know what I don't think we're going to feel it at the manufacturing facility.
Probably make it clear, make sure somebody says it out loud, to separate water capacity versus sewer capacity are two very different things. Right?
Correct. Yes.
We've been having a lot of discussions about the other half of that equation. That's a completely separate deal than what our water capacity looks like. We don't have the same strain and stress on our infrastructure on that side.
Correct.
Mr. Gore, if the council is acceptable, could we have something, and we could leave this to you, that there's something in the contract that has an act of God in there, and then also if if there was an issue with a drought just so we're protected, even
Sure.
though it's 1%, we need to be protected.
Absolutely.
Is everyone okay with that?
On a 1 year basis? On a 1 year basis?
Yeah, we can do year to year and do a 5 year contract year to year, and that's.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
These are just the terms. Again, this is something
Okay,
for
it's
you
a
all
draft.
so this is a draft.
Okay.
This is before, we will bring you back at a
Gotcha.
regular meeting, the final
Okay.
contract.
All right, we have some beer permits in front of you. Is everything in order, Miss Wright?
Yes, sir, they are. The summary here is pretty self-explanatory. I'll be glad to explain any of the locations if you're not sure where they are. I believe all of them are pending their building codes inspections for the regular permits. The special event permits are ready to go if you approve these today.
Do we have a motion for approving the beer permits?
So moved. Second.
Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Any payment of statements?
No, Mayor.
Any business from staff? I've got a couple of things that, or when I say a couple, I'm going to get through as many as I can. Ronnie, you may want to hear this real quick before we've all gotten a bunch of, no, I don't want to make you late, but we've all gotten a bunch of emails about the apartment complex that's on Northfield. So I had asked, staff met with Mr. Holtz, and then also another alternative on having, and Mr. Tucker is going to talk about this, an administrative hearing officer. So we went through and we've been getting these emails, and our main goal from talking to staff is to get the complex or any offender in compliance. But we can cite. They have 21 days to come on up, Mr. Holtz, and explain. So Ronnie, that's what I just want to tell you. If you're good to go. Thanks, buddy. See you, man.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. The apartment complex you're talking about is the point at Raiders Crossing on Tennessee Boulevard. I'd like to give you a little how we have to handle these situations when they come up by ordinance. They're property maintenance violations, weeds and grass, open storage, inoperable vehicles. By city ordinance and by code, when the inspector sees a violation, we document it with a picture, follow up the day after with a notice of violation. By ordinance, we have to give them 20 days to resolve that violation. At 21 days, we automatically go by and reinspect. If the violation still exists, do a citation to court, a work order. If the violation's been resolved, we'll close it. In a few instances, if it's repeat violators, we will keep the case open. so that if they violate it again in the near future, we can go right to citation instead of the 20-day process. So the apartment complex we're talking about, we started getting complaints into September, I believe, end of August, 1st of September, for trash in the street, which that's more of a police issue. We did go by and talk to the complex. They were picking up trash on the front of the property. They agreed to extend that to both sides all the way down to Rutherford Boulevard. And we've seen them several times doing this. So anytime we got the complaint, we would immediately go look. The trash was already picked up. Sometime in November, the complaints moved to the interior of the property by the compactor. We did talk to the complex. They've added a roll-off dumpster in the back. They have rearranged the chute on the compactor. What's happening is the chute's not steep enough. Tenants put a bag of trash in, it sits in the chute. Other tenants come by and it fills up. Once they can't get any more bags in there, they set it on the ground. They actually raised the chute up to as high as they could. It's still not working correctly. We got the worst complaint last week. We have made several inspections, and every time we go out there, it's already resolved. But this past Monday, we went out and there was a violation. We issued a citation to city court. Our plan going forward is to go out there every day, including weekends. If we see a violation, go ahead and just issue a citation to kind of get their attention. They have just emailed me and said they are going to put another compactor on site at the other end of the property, and that hopefully will resolve this situation. They've also agreed to have the maintenance workers go out on weekends. Any issues, they're going to go ahead and clean them up immediately. So I think we can typically only be reactive. We were trying to be proactive by going out and making inspections. I think in October, November, we went out 3 times a day, including weekends, for 10 days, and could not see a single violation. But right now, we have issued a citation. We were going to go out there daily, including weekends, and issue citations as needed.
And Mr. Tyndall explained yesterday, we can cite an individual and it's $50, but really when you cite a business, an individual can represent themselves in city court. But when you cite a business, they can't represent themselves in city court. They have to hire an attorney.
Yeah, the judge will require them to bring an attorney.
So, really the teeth in this is that when you cite a business, they're having, for this business that's in Franklin, they're having to hire an attorney to drive to Murfreesboro, spend time at city court, and drive back. So if you're figuring 4 hours at $250 an hour, they're spending $1,000 for legal representation. But then, we've had these property maintenance issues, and by state law, we can only cite for $50
per day per violation.
So Adam was in the office, and we got to talking about maybe another route, which is what you've got on your desk, and this is from MTAS, where we can have an option of having an administrative hearing officer. And so maybe, Adam, if you could tell the difference.
Sure. I'm going to give you a very rough overview of what this the administrative hearing officer program is. I don't have any formal proposal but it's just some information, food for thought, and I think discussions that we will have internally, staff, about this program. So currently, as both Mr. Holtz and the mayor have mentioned, enforcement of code violations is through city court and that $50 fine process. I believe in recognition of kind of the punch, or coercive power that comes with a $50 fine, or the limited power there. In 2010, the General Assembly authorized by statute all municipalities in Tennessee to institute an administrative hearing officer program, and these programs are an alternative to city court, where that the jurisdiction of the administrative hearing officer is limited to building and codes violations, property maintenance codes. In 2017, the statute was amended to include zoning codes, And then also ordinances regulating any subject matter commonly found in the codes mentioned above, which is the building, residential, plumbing, electrical, mechanical energy codes. I would think that things that we've been talking about here with respect to solid waste would probably fall into the jurisdiction of an administrative hearing officer program. The citation process is very similar to what we're currently doing. The real difference is that when a citation is issued, it goes before, within 7 days, goes before the administrative hearing officer to evaluate and determine if basically the evidence indicates or supports a finding of a violation, and then the hearing officer can assess a fine. Now, the fine for a residential property is up to $500 per violation. Now, and residential property it's a very narrow definition. It is a single family residence where the owner uses that residence as their primary residence. So you then go to the non-residential property. The fine is $500, up to $500 per day, up to $500 per violation per day. So that can increase very quickly, and that standard would be applicable to apartment complexes, commercial, industrial establishments, as well as the person who is renting out a single family home to a tenant. So the process, once the fine is assessed, what happens is that the notice is then sent to the property owner or the tenant, generally the property owner, and a hearing is set. And they have two options. They can either come before the administrative hearing officer for a hearing, or they can pay the fine and remediate it. If they appear at the hearing, they can. There will be a time set for remediating the penalty if that's been assessed. And so if it's and that period can range from 10 days to 120 days. However, if it can be shorter than 10 days if the violation presents a threat to health, safety, or the welfare of persons on the property. So it's basically, we find a violation. If you don't remedy it, this is what the fine is going to be. You can come in and say, I will remedy it. And they'll say, you have X number of days to do it. And then if they don't, there's a final order entered, and it gets entered. So it has a little bit more teeth than the current city court option. We've had multiple times in the past, I shouldn't say multiple times, maybe 2 or 3 times over the course of over the last 10 years, I've had conversations with various members of staff about the possibility of this, and it's for a variety of reasons we haven't moved forward with it, but I think it is an option, and is one that we're looking to possibly implement.
Adam, would anything short of not guilty of the charge would still result in a court cost?
No, I think there is not a court cost in this. There is not an additional fee for court. I don't believe, I'll have to double check the statute. I don't think it provides for court costs, but because the penalty is higher here.
The reason I asked them to look at this, and this was Adam's idea, and I'm not saying this for residential, because I think residential, we try our best to get, I know y'all deal with property maintenance issues all the time, but predominantly I think the issues that we have are with commercial complexes and rental houses. You know, so if we're really looking, $50 is not much of a deterrent. And so if we're really going to look on these property maintenance issues to put some teeth, this may be something we want to look at. You know, I know we're all tired of getting the same emails from the same group that, you know, they get notified, they clean it up, then the next week it's the same thing going on. So I was just asking them, give us something that gives us some other alternatives to try to fix this, and that's what they came back with.
Do we get to choose? Do we choose where we want the hearing officer cases to come up? So like, or is that just a choice we make one time, and now everybody who has a complaint is going to go to see a hearing officer instead of going to court?
It would be you cannot do it on an ad hoc basis. You would have to adopt this by ordinance and say violations of these provisions would.
Could we delineate between residential and commercial?
I don't know. I could look at it to see.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that question. Now, one of the things that I've thought about is, what does this mean for city court? Because I don't know what the percentage of the city court's jurisdiction is, but it is a significant part. I don't see anything in the statute that would prevent city council appointing the city judge to serve as the administrative hearing officer. And it would just be on, you know, the second Tuesday of every month, or the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. He's sitting not as city judge, but as the administrative hearing officer, and that the kind of the administrative part would still be run through the city court clerk part. So I don't think it may involve some changing of titles, maybe some changes in processes, but not any, you know, investment in terms of different personnel or employees.
Without knowing much about this, I would just say, I wouldn't necessarily feel the need to be inclined to think it needs to be the same. Right? Just because you don't want, the first thing that comes to my mind is you don't want to be, you know, we're just changing something on this day, he's this, and this day he's that. I mean, you know, if it needs to be different, let's make a different person.
Right.
Know, unless there's some substantial cost to that, that's
Yeah.
the thing we got to figure out.
The more that we got into it, and really after, you know, we started getting these property maintenance and having the discussion with Mr. Holtz, and then with Adam, and then with Mr. Tyndall and Mr. Whitaker, and I mean really the whole staff, and that's the other thing. I mean, there's no telling how many man hours or staff hours that we're spending for a $50 fine, when, you know, we've got inspectors going out there on a, you said, daily basis, and
3 times a day for 10 days.
yeah, and so, you know, when do we get to the point that, and we don't even have, and nor should we have control over how the judge rules on the individual cases, but as the administrative hearing officer, that if we know that we're putting a priority on these property maintenance issues, then that really could be pretty cut and dry on, you know, we're not going to waive a $50 fine and just allow you to pay court costs. We want this cleaned up. And so this is the option that allows us to be able to do that. So the question with council is, do we want them to at least give us the option and proceed forward on telling us, here's what the next steps would be?
I would. I'd like to see what the option looks like.
Yeah. What I've provided to you is a printout of description from MTAS, and and I've also given you a copy of the Administrative Hearing Officer Ordinance from Oak Ridge, Tennessee, which is the only reason I picked Oak Ridge was that it's the only one that I found in a very quick search that had expanded the jurisdiction of the hearing officer to include zoning violations. Knoxville, for example, has an administrative hearing officer, but as it stands right now, that administrative hearing officer does not hear zoning violations. So that.
But I think the thing we wanted to get across, and this is really to legal and to Mr. Holtz, I know, we're not trying to shoot the messenger because you're dealing with what comes to you, but, I think if we're going to continually have the same offenders, and, that's like what we dealt with 2 years ago when we were having the same issues with crime at these different complexes, and, just because it's okay 1 month, I think where we are and what we've talked about is we got to find a way to give you all the tools in the toolbox to basically say this can't happen. And if you're not, we appreciate them putting a compactor out, but we can't continually get this from the residents. That's not being good neighbors, and we need to have some teeth in our ordinance to be able to allow y'all to not just have to send somebody out there. I mean, the taxpayer in this whole deal is the one who gets the raw end of the deal, because we're having to pay. I mean, our codes officials are busy enough doing, 70 and 80 residential inspections a day and going out and looking at signs. And the last thing that we have time to do is go out every time there's trash on the street or have somebody going out there three times a day. So in my business, if I get hit with $1,000 fine, you can bet that the management inside that complex is going to fix it, or they're not going to have a job. So that's what we need to figure out. So,
can we put more teeth in our current ordinance based on the statute changing, as far as the $50 limitation?
So long as it's being prosecuted at city court, no. It's a Tennessee Constitution has a provision that dates back to 1789 that it was set at $50, and it's never been updated. Well, I think that's when that Tennessee became a state, right? 1789. What? 1796. Thank you. 1796. I learned about Ohio history growing up, not Tennessee history.
There's a show out in every room. Just remember that, Adam.
So dating back to the Constitution of 1796,
right?
They said basically no one shall be assessed a fine more than $50 unless it's done by a jury. And assessed by a jury, and city court, there's no jury, so the most you can be fined is $50.
All right, so I think we'd like y'all, Mr. Holtz, to do whatever you can to fix what we've got, because I think we're all going to relay back to the people we've been receiving emails that we talked about it, and we're trying to find something different. And then Mr. Tucker, if you'll come to us with an overall suggestion.
Yeah.
All right, so I got a couple more things. First, airport, I don't know if you saw this, but we got an email where Mr. Gerke was successful in securing $1 million grant from the Tennessee Department of Transportation for our airport. So, Mr. Gerke, a lot of that was, so congratulations.
That's two consecutive years.
It's $2 million last year and $1 million this year, so we've got $3 million. So, want to congratulate Greg McKnight, who was named our interim planning director. So, Greg, congratulations. Mr. Whitaker, and make sure council's okay with this. We don't have to get into a big discussion, but we are now 4 years in on our design guidelines, and I think that we all have seen, especially through planning, some things that we may need to look at on formal open space requirements and things that on the design guidelines that necessarily, I'm not saying we didn't know what we were approving at the time, but things that maybe have not worked like we have anticipated. So I think what we have got the recommendation is to put a group together with a planning commission member, staff, and some of our design stakeholders to come back with recommendations to the council on one instance is maybe where we're requiring formal open space on projects that are either small enough or really don't necessarily need formal open space, is maybe how that applicant would pay what they would be spending in formal open space into a park fund that would allow us to put open space where we really need open space. Yeah. So with your agreements, we were going to get that together, and then one of our two council members that serve on the planning commission will serve on that committee. Also talked about, we've had a lot of discussion on bulk zoning, so this would really be more of a legal issue, but met with an applicant this morning that's got a large piece of property on Highway 99 in the corner of Barfield that they're going to bring through on a commercial highway zoning request, but they also have an overall master plan that they have with that. But the question is, if we could somehow, with a commercial highway request, also incorporate a master plan with that bulk zoning request. And that way, I don't think our MU zoning is a good example to say a master plan and a wide variety, but that may be a better alternative to just having a bulk zoning if you do have a master plan with that. So they were going to look at that. And then the last thing, and this may be just something on y'all's radar, we did get a request from the American Cancer Society that a lot of municipalities, and really a lot of them around us, have made their city properties tobacco-free. So, we don't allow tobacco on park property, or we do allow tobacco on park property.
Not in indoor areas and not in some designated outdoor areas,
Okay.
but not a comprehensive restriction.
We've gotten a request and I told them that I would bring it forward to the council for discussion at some point, maybe our next workshop, but about making city facilities smoke-free on our, the more I got to thinking about this, when I drive down, I can think it's Williamson Drive or Garrison Drive now, the hospital now does not allow anyone to smoke on their campus. So, and then also State Farm, if you notice when you go down to Jarnett, you have to go, you'll see them over on city property smoking now because they don't allow smoking. So anyway, something that will maybe come up at our next meeting that I did tell them that we would discuss that as a city. So all the smokers now in our city are going to be contacting us over the next 30 days. So, yeah, I hadn't even thought about that, the golf course.
Yes, and Mr. Wade wants to know, does that include weed?
Mr. Williams doesn't care if you think it's okay. No, I'm just kidding. I meant to say Mr. Wade when I said that.
All right. So those are our last, our last few things about this coming up. So does the council have any other things? We will not meet this Thursday night. And don't forget that we did pass for our next council meeting. Those meetings will start at 6 o'clock. So we need to make sure, don't forget that you're like church when daylight savings time comes around and you come in an hour late for the service. So 6 o'clock is is our time.
We'll have a meeting on the 23rd, or do you think we will or we will not? Likely. It's a short week, but we moved the public hearing, didn't we, to the 30th because of that?
Yeah, but
Moved it to the 30th, I thought.
I thought we said because it was a short week, we were not going to meet.
Yeah, I think it's.
We'll get Mr. Tyndall to email us. Yeah. So, all right. If there's no other business, we'll stand adjourned.